Several Middle Eastern countries have cut their ties with Qatar, and Donald Trump wants to take all the credit for that and more. Now, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain accused Qatar of supporting terrorism and cut diplomatic ties with the nation. Yemen, the Maldives, and Libya's eastern-based government also broke off relations with Qatar. So essentially what they said was, hey, you know, Qatar is very transparent and open about supporting Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. And so as a result, we gotta cut diplomatic ties. Because a country like Saudi Arabia would never wanna sponsor terrorism, right? Anyway, so Donald Trump has taken credit for this recent development in the Middle East. He tweeted with the following statement: "During my recent trip to the Middle East, I stated that there can no longer be funding of radical ideology. Leaders pointed to Qatar. Look." Okay.
And yet Steve Bannon still draws a salary.
Yeah.
Weird.
So good to see the Saudi Arabia visit with the king and 50 countries already paying off. They said they would take a hard line on funding extremism, and all reference was pointing to Qatar. Perhaps this will be the beginning of the end to the horror of terrorism. No, it won't be.
So he obviously is trying to get credit for it and trying to imply that he had something to do with it. But even inside of that, he has to keep saying all reference was to Qatar, as if he doesn't believe his own point and he needs to buttress it inside of the tweets themselves. But well, let's keep it real. He doesn't know the first thing about this region or that country in particular.
He knows nothing.
If Megyn Kelly gets to interview him, please just sit him down and say, so could you just say 3 facts about Qatar? Just 3. It could be anything about the cuisine, about the transportation system, anything, 3 facts about it, and he would draw a blank. In fact, if you said a couple sentences, he wouldn't remember which country you were asking about.
So you guys might think, oh, come on, John's being hyperbolic, he's being unfair, Trump must know something. And by the way, Qatar has been transparent in its support of Hamas, and if you have problems with that, I completely understand, right? However, keep in mind that this issue is extremely complex, and it's very clear that Trump doesn't understand how complex it is. So why is it complex? Well, Qatar actually does serve a purpose as somewhat of a US ally. So Qatar hosts the largest US airbase in the region, and we use that airbase in order to strike ISIS in Iraq and Syria. So just something to keep in mind, right? And so Trump is on Twitter, talking about how terrible Qatar is, while the Defense Department is like, Qatar, we really thank Qatar for their help in letting us use this airbase and allowing us to carry out these, counterterrorism missions. So the Pentagon moved toward damage control and thanked Qatar for hosting US forces and its enduring commitment to regional security. Yeah. That is a quote.
And Rex Tillerson too was trying to say, we're going to try to get them back at the negotiating table, try to get past this little rift. I mean, there's similarities too when he was undercutting his own Justice Department's legal case about the travel ban. It's like having Donald Trump as your president when you're in the executive branch is like challenge mode. Like he always has to make things a little bit more difficult to accomplish what are supposedly his goals. And he certainly doesn't understand, even if maybe someone's explained to him how complicated the situation is, the influence of Iran and the different regimes, and whether Saudi Arabia likes one family or likes another family. Whether he gets any of that, he certainly doesn't understand how long it is. The idea that Saudi Arabia, who's had a relationship with Qatar for obviously a very long time, suddenly sat down with Trump, and after one conversation, you know what, we're cutting off relations with Qatar and we're gonna convince all these other countries to do it. As if that wasn't the culmination of a long process of diplomacy and considerations about the military situation. What are the economic ramifications, which are huge, all of that. He thinks, oh, he said stop funding radical ideology and it's done.
Yeah, look, international relations reminds me of like high schoolers. Right? No, but it is. I mean, if you really think about it in simplistic terms, right? So for a long time, Saudi Arabia had no problems with Hamas. In fact, Saudi Arabia funded Hamas itself. So let me give you some details on that. Let's go to graphic 25. This is according to the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. They reported that Saudi Arabia funded the majority of Hamas's operations between 2000 and 2004 and only began to scale back support for Hamas in 2004 due to US pressure. Now Hamas is trying to cozy up to Saudi Arabia again, but it's important to keep in mind mind that obviously Israel is against Hamas for very understandable reasons, and Saudi Arabia is trying to draw a bit of an alliance with Israel, and so all of a sudden they're openly criticizing, Qatar funding Hamas. The reason why I'm bringing all of this up is because it reminds me of high school conflict, right? Where Sandy used to be friends with Pam, but then Pam all of a sudden was friends with Mandy, and then Mandy doesn't like Sandy. It's ridiculous, right? But
who's the Houthi rebels in this?
I don't even remember the names that I just said right now, right? And I'm not trying to, apply girl names to these specific countries, but it's all complicated. There's a lot of context and nuance that it seems as though Trump hasn't followed along with. And it's worrying because even if you have problems with, what Qatar supports, I mean, it's kind of irresponsible to immediately blow them off as they support terrorism and we don't need them at all, and like it's because of me that they cut diplomatic ties. Okay, look into the country and see whether or not that's the right statement to make publicly.
Yeah. So I just wish Congress would hurry up and impeach Trump so we can get rid of these distractions and get down to the real business of impeaching Pence.
Impeaching what?
Pence. Yeah. And then you know what? After that, we'll relax. We'll further impeachments.
Yeah.
Just keep on going down the line.
I mean,
Oh, and then one final thing. So for those of you who are wondering why Trump seems to be a little soft on Saudi Arabia, well, graphic 14, the Trump International Hotel received $270,000 from a lobbying campaign tied to the government of Saudi Arabia last year, according to a filing submitted to the Justice Department just last week. Yeah. Now, MSL Group, which again is a lobbying arm affiliated with Saudi Arabia, was helping Saudi Arabia with several lobbying efforts, including opposing the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act, which allows the families of 9/11 victims to sue Saudi Arabia. Why would the victims of 9/11, why would the family members of 9/11 victims want to sue Saudi Arabia? That's weird. Could it be because Saudi Arabia played a role in 9/11? Possibly.
What do you get for Young Turks membership? It's a mystery. Only one way to find out. TYTnetwork.com/join.